A Science of Change, podcasting by Gilmore Crosby, social scientist, author, and organization development professional since 1984. Greetings, this is Gil Crosby with you again, and I have the very special honor of speaking with my friend Joseph George, who has traveled all the way from India. This is a live conversation. We're in the same space. Unlike many of my podcasts, we're seated together, and I'll just let Joseph George introduce himself further, including his last name, which I have failed to pronounce correctly so far in my attempts. But he has traveled all the way from India to visit with family and other colleagues and done me the honor of stopping in Wilmington, Delaware. And so it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Gil. And the name did have a tongue twister in there. That's Anjilvelil, and that's the convention down south in Kerala, India, where my parents come from. Although they stay in Pune, up north, where my father worked since 1961 till retirement.
Wow.
But Anjilvelil is literally translated from the Malayalam, that's the language, which is to say, within the fencing of or the compound of a kind of jackfruit tree, which is called Anjali. So it's known as Anjali Chaka. In fact, the British may have translated the word chaka as jack, and that's how it became jackfruit.
Nice.
So there is an etymology to that as well.
And it's abundant where you live. And jackfruit.
Yes. Jackfruit itself is in abundance, and this variety is much sought after for its special kind of sweetness and size. It's a very comfortable size.
Well, I hope to eat some jackfruit with you someday in India. Well, so if you would be so kind as just to say, well, how did we wind up together, beginning with your childhood?
Mm-hmm.
But whatever you want to say about your journey into the behavioral sciences, and but that's somehow brought us to this moment now.
Yeah, I think I got to know of you through the ODNet listserv.
Right.
Which Matt Minahan was kind to introduce to me.
Once upon a time, it seemed like advanced technology, but we basically send in emails and then later get the emails from the others and then respond. Yes. Starting in 96 or so is when I
got onto it only after 2005.
Okay.
But nonetheless, that's where I first began reading both your father's emails as well as you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I knew there was one such entity as Gilmore. But my initiation into behavioral science, let me see if I can condense it in a way that goes with the length of your podcast.
Sure. Which is any length we want it to be, but generally it's about an hour.
Yeah. So I grew up in the city of Pune, where my father worked. My father was working for the central government of India as a, you could say, a production engineer, production manager. They were making prototypes for the defense in an R&D establishment. So his was a largely non-transferable job. So he put anchor there.
Mm-hmm.
I was educated in a Jesuit school, Loyola High School.
Okay.
There's a lot of Jesuit influence on me in terms of being men for others, etc.
They certainly were active in this area, especially a little further north and into Canada. The Jesuits were some of the first explorers here.
Yeah. There was at least one principal of mine who did his PhD in education administration from Chicago. I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah. But nonetheless, I schooled in the 70s and early 80s, and it was a time where in India, you could say the official rat race had begun. That is to say, everybody was out to be either an engineer or a medical doctor. And something about it didn't seem right to me even when I was in school. And I would like to admit very candidly that were it not for a particular Jesuit, I would have been insane in this respect.
Okay.
He told me to follow my own calling. He's Reverend Father Vincent Gomes Kutao of Goa, but our principal then. And
that's very much like Howard Thurman's advice that my father's mentor, find what brings you alive and then do that.
Yeah. And I also was privy to some ethical tensions he resolved between the school and officials from the government and all of that, and how he held on to the values, exposing me to aspects of Jesuit way of life, the Ratio Studiori, etc., etc. And it struck me that one could be different in what was a rat race world. So I was battling tensions from my parents who wished to see me as an engineer, but I didn't quite cut the grade in that competitive scenario. And I didn't want my parents to put me through private school.
And probably many of the parents at the time wanted their sons to be engineers.
Very much so, very much so.
Or like you said, doctors.
Yeah, at least 2 decades ago when I looked up our school roll call of about 120 students, close to 80 became engineers. And several of them did their masters here in the US.
And I've met some wonderful engineers from India.
Yeah. I went there for the next available option in science. And this is useful disclosure in that I got disillusioned in the way people were teaching basic sciences at university level. And I went up to the principal and said, somehow I'm not feeling comfortable in here. I'd like to go to the humanities. And little did I know how supportive he would be too. And he said, well, just that administratively, you'll have to wait for a few months. With your marks, you could get admission to the Bachelor of Arts degree. And it so happens that I chose my subjects, which was sociology, political science, and political geography, and so on and so forth. And in the first year, there was a paper on philosophy and the epistemology of science, logic. Okay. And this principal turns out to be the teacher there. And I was fortunate enough to do well there.
Cool.
I remember standing second in college and sixth in university on that paper alone that the principal held. And my parents perhaps just reconciled to the fact that, I made the shift. But nonetheless, during my graduation years, I said to myself, I either join the personal management or human resource management profession or become a journalist. The influence on my, let's say, character formation from the Jesuits and what have you around us in India got me to say I need to be reporting the truth. And maybe, as one of my former bosses would say, there was a Fabian socialist within me at that time. All right. But it so happens that the entrance exam to the Tata Institute of Social Sciences.
Oh, really? You became a student at Tata?
That's right.
Okay. And you teach there now?
I teach there now.
Yeah, okay. I was a guest speaker there once.
Yes, I did remember those years in the pandemic where we could do these things more, naturally. But nonetheless, the Tata Institute entrance exam was such that I accept my seat if I get selected the very next day or so, or give it up. And this was before the entrance exam for journalism.
Oh, okay.
My mentors in journalism, one of whom is very much in touch with me even today, advised that I will not get the Tata Institute seat again, but I can always write later in life.
Sounds
And
wise.
on the strength of that wisdom, if you might call it that, I joined the personal management and industrial relations course at Tata Institute of Social Sciences.
Okay, cool.
And
Now we're into
1989 to 91.
okay.
And that's when I was very impressed by an extremely gifted and you can say competent teacher, Dr. Shubhrata Pandey, who went on to be my PhD guide as well.
Okay.
And I was fortunate to find such teachers who steered me through the method of science, the investigations, and so on and so forth. And well, I lost my brother when I was studying at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He was younger to me.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he was a student of engineering,
Mm.
and he was also a sportsman.
Mm.
So on this particular day, he went out rowing. He was practicing, you could say, for junior nationals, single cocks. Okay,
Alone in the boat.
alone in the boat, and they let the water out from the dam because the rains were very heavy. In fact, he went to the rowing area because the ground was unplayable for football and he needed his physical exercise. Anyway, the water was 6 feet above normal because of the discharge from the dam, and we recovered his body later, 48 hours after the incident.
Wow.
This was then, and therefore I shifted from Mumbai to Pune after my first job there, second job there. And
well, sisters.
Oh, he was just the only other brother.
He was your only sibling.
Yes, that's right.
So I feel sad.
Yes. So my parents said, "Okay, we've had enough. Why don't you come back to Pune, get a job somewhere?"
Yeah.
So I did take a
Sure,
job.
they felt protective of you.
Yeah,
By then.
you could say that.
Yeah.
It was also for some company because for 5 years after my brother's passing, my parents were not very social. They hardly got out of the house.
Yeah.
And
What a shock.
yeah. So we had to shift from government quarters to our own residence, and my parents needed help in that. So I was around, and I took up a job with an auto ancillary, and I was the first one to introduce human resource development as also OD.
Okay.
And it so happened that being with my parents in a smaller town gave me more time, and my research guide suggested that I take up research in a more concerted manner. My original investigation that I wanted to really pursue was this area of entrepreneurs who, when they grew to a certain size, wouldn't be able to do it all their own, and they needed professionals to help them. So when we were looking at such entrepreneurs, and I particularly was interested in what does the entrepreneur go through to be able to let go.
Yeah, it's a big change.
And that's perhaps an unstudied area anywhere in the globe.
Sure.
And we had a few of those entrepreneurs who were making it big then.
Reminds me of a colleague in Estonia, though, where there's very much a similar dilemma. So there's people starting things up, and then because they have like a technical idea,
Yes.
next thing they know, they're trying to manage people.
Yes.
When they have no advanced like preparation for doing that.
Yes. So yeah, their need for autonomy often combats with the requisite relationship building
Absolutely.
for the task. And,
sure.
And that's what I was really interested in. So cool. My coursework was on that. And it was an entrepreneurial orientation and learning styles. And I was invited to present at an entrepreneurship institute in India as the only behavioral scientist among all economists and financial analysts and all of that.
I bet you were a fresh breath of fresh air.
Yeah, okay, you could say that. But then the work that I was doing at the auto industry really picked up. So it was not just HRD, it was engaging workmen who were unionized from a very social psychological perspective. Then we also faced the initial exodus of IT talent because everybody was getting bigger jobs and we had attrition in that place. So
you mean out of the like clear out of the country. That
Uh,
attrition, or
Both ways.
yeah,
Yeah, some were going to better jobs than this auto ancillary could provide them.
okay.
Better in the sense, better remuneration.
Hmm. So
And
just to other companies within
yeah,
India.
within
Yeah,
India.
yeah, yeah.
So I ended up actually supervising a set of IT engineers so that I could hold fort.
Hmm.
Uh, I remember it was a HP Mini on Unix and Oracle running the database
Okay,
management.
okay.
So I was doing that. I was also, looking at the intersection between human resource management and business strategy and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
I was just doing too many things along with these academic commitments. Uh, it was not easy to sustain.
Yeah, yeah.
By then I was married.
Uh-huh.
Our son came along, became very difficult to do justice to both the job and the academic pursuit.
And how many children do you have?
I have one son.
One son. Okay.
Yeah, he stays with us back in Bangalore.
Hmm.
But nonetheless, that was a challenge that I had to put up to management. And I said, it's not easy to do justice.
Hmm.
I'd like to take leaves. Maybe you could provide some kind of sabbatical if you wish.
Hmm.
And they said, no, we can't make it look like a sabbatical. Otherwise, we'd be making an exception because we don't even have a policy. So I
Hmm.
said, then, all right, I call it quits. I'll find it easier to complete my, research work and then get to another job or vacation later. Or if you're open to it, I'll come back later.
Hmm.
That was a parting ways. And after that, my research guide said,
You're a bold guy.
yeah, switching from science to arts and then
Yeah,
this
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. There's a history, a
Yeah.
pattern of taking bold moves.
Yeah, now that you say it, I remember it. Yes, I was seen as you can say, nonconformist
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
of sorts.
uh-huh.
And
Which may be rare in India. I don't know, but
yeah, it was rare in my time.
yeah.
We have more people doing it now.
Just uh, without losing your train of thought, hopefully you've chosen to leave that company so that you can at least continue your academic work.
That's
And
right.
when was this?
This would have been 98.
98. Okay,
Yes.
okay. But that when I said that it must have been a breath of fresh air, you didn't sound so certain with your response. I'm just curious, when you were the only behavioral science speaking at that
Conference.
event, yeah,
Yes.
did the audience seem appreciative, or did
Well, the
they?
organizers were very enthused.
Uh-huh.
So I'll give you two anecdotes from there.
Uh-huh.
There was one professor, um, Awasthi, who was like the deputy director, but was the heart and soul of the conference.
Uh-huh.
And so now we like these intuitive things that really tickles our brains as well. So welcome.
Uh-huh.
And then I met the current director of IIM Bangalore, that's Indian Institute of Management Bangalore, at that conference. And so
Okay.
our connection goes back that long.
Uh-huh.
His colleague who presented there, Professor Ganesh Prabhu, sorry, he passed away maybe a year or two ago. But nonetheless, that was quite an opportunity. The other was we have a business historian in India who also passed away recently,
Mm.
who was very taken by the fact that this kind of paper doesn't come too often.
Okay.
And he said, we have this journal of entrepreneurship, and
Uh-huh.
I'd like you to contribute this
Mm.
particular paper to the
Nice.
thing.
So you were mostly received warmly.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Cool.
And he was a business historian, and
Uh-huh.
his words are more than respected. They're very revered.
I found that for myself when I'm in a nuclear power conference, and I'm the only person speaking from an OD perspective. That even though it's an audience of engineers, that they're maybe more excited.
I think it shifts patterns for people.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what they really value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their common cognitions are disturbed.
Uh-huh.
And perhaps it's
Takes them to something new at least.
yeah, and perhaps it's something that even if it's unsettling, it's welcome.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the receptivity that I experienced.
Mm-hmm. Good. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you were received that
Yeah,
way.
yeah. I was trying to stay core to your query about how I got in touch with you, right?
Uh-huh.
So this is the longish part of the story.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh, and my research guide was concerned that I was giving up a job like this and
Mhm.
said, look, I'm going to be leaving the Tata Institute of Social Sciences myself to do independent consulting. And I don't mind if you can give me, say, 1 or 2 weeks a month, and you get some pocket money to keep your family alive, and you can continue your research.
Mm-hmm.
Now that went on to be, I remember saying, in a few months, those 1 or 2 weeks became 40 days a month in a sense. That's the amount of work we used to get.
Mm.
And some of the work was actually to do with assessment centers, development centers,
Mm-hmm.
and even OD projects.
Mm-hmm.
And it became very difficult for me to sustain my energy on my original intent of looking at what entrepreneurs do.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a very
Which was now part of a doctorate thesis
no,
or
that
something?
was just the preparatory coursework, which is known as the Masters of Philosophy.
Okay.
So that went in there,
Uh-huh.
but I could not complete the PhD intent that I had on that subject.
Right.
My research guide said, "Look, we're doing a whole lot of OD work. Why don't you do something there?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I went into a particular style of OD interventions that my research guide would do. And that's the parallel organization. You create virtual organizations within the client system
Okay.
where members would practice in what we might classically call a non-threatening work environment,
Okay.
the skills required to implement change requisite to that context.
Hmm.
Of
And by
course,
virtual, you mean it was a separate, new structure, but it was
yes,
live. It
it was
wasn't
live.
virtual in the sense of online or something. It was,
Correct.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's not virtual as we understand in the tech world.
Mm-hmm.
Virtual in the sense that it is not yet formalized,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a practice organization
Okay.
where we learn the new skill,
Mm-hmm.
but apply the problem solving pieces
Mm-hmm.
on live organization problems.
Okay. Well, it's not unlike what we do with the Leadership Institute of Seattle. We have, in a sense, a virtual world where people come and gather and they're in T groups and so on. And then they're working on application. They're on things that they're actually trying to accomplish in the organization. So it's
So that's something I'd love to pick up from you, even beyond this podcast.
mm-hmm,
But for me,
mm-hmm,
it meant sitting in a physical library every weekend when I would get time from work
mm-hmm.
and copiously making notes from available literature.
Okay.
And these were days before the internet could give us any access to journals back then.
So besides the people that were in the experiment, in a sense, in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
organization, you were also like trying to document the theoretical foundation
exactly
for
right.
doing such a thing.
Yes,
And
and the
okay.
names I came across were like Zand, um, then um, I mentioned a paper yesterday, Rubinstein,
Mm-hmm.
right? Spider-Man and the Burma Raiders.
Which has a great name. I have to
Yeah,
read it
yeah,
just for the
yeah.
name. So,
Uh, and I uncovered many other aspects, not just about the collateral organization, as it is called in the academic journals, but also aspects of evaluating OD.
hmm
For example, at that time, not many people in India, leave alone my research guide, knew that there's something known as the black box of change,
okay.
in which you could have alpha, beta, and gamma change,
Hmm.
where alpha change is more like the absolute change between uh, when we started the intervention
hmm
and when we end up the
Like a
intervention.
new IT system is in place, that's an absolute change, or
In
a culture
behaviors
that's
too,
changed.
yeah, in
Yeah.
behaviors too, the assumption is, let's say, I'm more involved in work today,
Okay.
and my work involvement is contrasted with what it was before the intervention.
hmm
And then I just say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, where do I think I was?
Sure.
Right?
That'd be the culture change that would be frozen in place in Lewin's thinking. You
Possible.
go from non-involvement
Yeah.
to involvement
Yeah.
as the
So that's
culture.
alpha change.
Okay.
But beta change would be, oh, I thought this was involvement before, but I think it's more like my own predisposition to risk taking.
Mm. Okay.
So uh, you asked me about involvement. Back then it wasn't 4. I think it was 2,
Mm-hmm.
and today I think uh, I need to revise my rating of them. So it is not 4; it was 2.
Okay, because now I'm looking at my own
Yes.
intra.
Yes.
It's intrapersonal.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
So now it's a beta change.
Okay, that's beta,
Yeah.
is how we say it here.
Yes, beta.
But uh-huh.
And gamma would be that, we weren't looking at just the recalibration of the scale. Perhaps it's a new construct altogether. Like I would have looked at involvement by jumping on an opportunity, but now I realize it's not what involvement or risk taking is. I was impulsive.
Hmm.
So the construct itself has changed, let alone the rating on the scale.
Okay.
So that's gamma change.
So that's like the mental model.
Yes, it's like a transformation within me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So this is in the black box of change, and you can
Okay.
see a few people like,
Never heard it put
yeah,
that way before.
yeah. But I read these things,
Mm-hmm.
which intrigued my research guide, who's
Mm-hmm.
very stickler for methodology as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, "Why don't you evaluate the style of intervention I do from that point of view?" And that became my thesis.
Cool.
So my thesis on OD evaluation had to do with a singular organization from pre-contracting to withdrawal of the consultant.
Mm-hmm.
I have constructed scales within the case study to be able to uh, demonstrate.
And you applied this alpha,
Yes,
beta,
yes, yes,
gamma.
very much,
Okay.
very
Yeah. Nice.
much. Okay, and well, that was my doctoral piece. My bosses at Wipro were very
When did you
happy.
complete that and
At
actually have your
2005.
2005?
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's a
Congratulations.
small story there too, because my thesis work was taking time. And then my research guide said, "Look, you're the youngest on our team. If you can get a job someplace, I'll be happy. I'll be relieved. I'll be able to maintain relations with others as well." And I too was, getting burned out in that sense. And Wipro, this company, gave me this opportunity to be an internal change agent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when, in 2002, I joined them. And I have the pleasant memory of my former boss, who actually gave me time from work, special leave, so to speak, to complete the pending pieces of my writing. So that was then.
Mm-hmm.
And he insisted that you've learned only in a peculiar context. I'd like you to be exposed to more global standards, and I'm going to send you to the NTL program.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And that's how I got exposed to the NTL traditions.
So you came to Washington, D.C.?
No, in fact, my boss, Ranjanacharya, and the then HR head of Unilever,
Uh-huh.
Harish Devrajan, and the then HR boss of a bank called ICICI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they all got together and decided that, why don't we sponsor the NTL faculty to come to India
Oh, okay. Okay.
and have a batch? So we had this batch there, and Karthikeyan, who comes on our ODNet list. Karthik.
Yeah.
He and I attended the same cohort.
Nice. Okay.
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 And that's how my exposure to the NTL traditions began.
He wrote a book about the organization as like an orchestra. I think that's Kartik, or maybe that's.
No, he does bring music into his work.
Yeah.
But he's actually instrumented a transformation alignment mapper, in which you can say he uses certain metaphors that come from music, but it's very much founded on um, one's openness to structure and order, uh, unfolding and newness, novelty, and
maybe thinking of a gentleman from the country that China, Tibet. I may be thinking of a gentleman from Tibet in his book. He's also on that.
Yeah. But Karthik has written a more recent book.
Okay.
Which is founded on very Indian experience of parents expecting conformance from their children, and he's called it the good boy syndrome. Well, that's another story. Nonetheless, uh, we find,
This
yeah,
is
discover the alchemist within is the transformation alignment map.
oh, so this is Kartik.
Yes, this
Yeah.
is
Okay.
Kartik.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah. I enjoyed this. This
Yeah,
is
this is quick reference for
it
you.
was a
Very
nice
nice.
nice shift of
Yes, yes.
how to look at things.
Yeah. So when I got exposed to the NTR way and met
Uh
very
huh.
liberally, um, enabled us to these forums, the ODNet list and all of that,
Uh huh.
uh, is when I got access to people like you through the ODNet list. And
Okay. Okay.
I remember another lady by name Lisa who passed on. She had an OD circle or something like that in virtual form. Yeah, anyway, I happened to meet her at least once in one of the OD network conferences there.
Okay.
So,
You
long story.
you came to OD Network conferences in the
Yes,
U.S.
yes, I have
Okay.
at least attended two. One at Minneapolis,
I didn't go to that one.
yeah, and
I've been
then
to many.
yeah, and then one in San Francisco.
I didn't go to that one
Yeah. So
either. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Cool.
By the way, people like Bob Marshak,
Yes.
Brenda B. Jones,
Uh huh.
um, Ted Schutte,
Uh huh.
Matt Miniman,
Uh huh.
Chris Worley were all faculty who came to India.
Okay. Nice.
Mm.
I've gotten to know Marshak because I just wrote a paper about dialogic OD, diagnostic OD, and Lewinian OD that both Marshak and Gervais Bush gave me a lot of feedback on
Oh, I'd love to see that
as I
one
wrote it. So it's due out in the next OD review.
whenever it comes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I'll be speaking on it in Spokane. The next OD Network conference is
wonderful.
in Spokane in
Wow,
October.
wow.
In case you want to fly across the globe again.
Oh my, that'll
Yeah,
be a tough one. I
no
somehow
doubt.
managed to come down this time.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No,
Yeah,
this is wonderful. Okay, so that got you to the OD network and the digest, the online list, and we started interacting with each other,
that's right.
and then I think there was maybe particularly the Lewin book that sort of got you excited.
Yes, I wouldn't know, for example, what got you to get me to read the book and review it for you. We never knew each other. We haven't even shaken hands until yesterday.
Yes, and I wish I knew what how to explain that. It's lost in the details of 2018, maybe or so. And I
Yeah,
wrote that book on Lewin, and uh, by then I just respected you from the comments and contributions you made in that listserv group. So
yes,
we had never spoken.
yes,
Just
I must add that whomever I interacted with on the audio list, I mean, very generous.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's a generous group.
yeah, you were generous even before we met. But our faculty at NTL, extremely generous,
Yeah.
sharing and wanting the
Matt,
knowledge to grow.
certainly
Yeah,
Matt was
absolutely.
very
Yeah,
active in that
yeah,
group,
yeah.
and yeah,
So thank you for
sure,
that.
sure. That's a pleasure. So then, yesterday we covered some ground just when you arrived here in Wilmington about how I started. Well, Dad started in 1953 in his first T group, and then he was in all kinds of workshops with NTL with Lippert and Binet and Bradford and others, and eventually, he practiced more and more really social change at first through his positions with the United Methodist Church, uh, church camp integration, church staff integration, and anything he could do really. But when he got into OD, then I followed in his footsteps, and so by in '84 I started with him, and but then here I was doing basic Lewinian OD all along with Dad, and there were concepts he would throw in like force field analysis and so on. But it wasn't until I started reading critiques of Lewin
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I thought I would write back.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I wrote it in defense of Lewin for ODR. Actually, they were called something else back then, not the OD Review, but the
OD practitioner.
That's it, the OD Practitioner. And that's when I realized, because I was critiquing people who had critiqued Lewin, and I was saying, well, they haven't, as far as I can tell, they don't. Doesn't seem like they've read Lewin.
Mm.
And then I had to say to myself, I haven't read Lewin much either. And so who am I to critique them if I'm not willing to do the work myself? And my whole life and career are based on a foundation of this person.
Yeah.
So that's when I started reading we have a pile of books here, listeners. And actually, when we mentioned Kartek before and got it that was him, was because I showed Joseph George the cover of a book. You couldn't see that happen. You could just hear us talking.
Yeah.
But amongst the books here that helped me then with Lewin are these APA books that we've been talking about the last couple of days. Resolving Social Conflicts and Field Theory in Social Science, which is just a what do you call it? Put together a whole bunch of Lewin articles, which we just found out you can still get this one, the one I just mentioned, on Amazon as a Kindle. But these are both out of print. And so the other one's The Complete Social Scientist, which has also numerous Lewin original writing. And so I got into all that and started reading it to make sure I knew what I was talking about in my response to these critics of Lewin. And that's when I thought, for one, that I loved it. I love reading Lewin.
Well,
And so then I thought I would like the more people to have this. So that's when I wrote this book, the Plan Change book.
I'm glad you did it, because the passion with which your your reflections come through in writing, they're not just pithy, they are very comprehensive. So this quality of your writing has always appealed to me, whether whether they be the transcripts of books you shared,
Mm-hmm.
or even the articles that got published in the OD Practitioner. And I would say my respect for you has only grown.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I believe in the possibility of social science helping to create a better future for humanity.
Mm.
And that's important to me. I'm
Yeah.
not sure why. I won't be around in that better future, but I care about.
Yeah. We spoke a bit to this yesterday about the motive.
Yes.
Yeah, something that's larger than ourselves,
Mhm.
etc. And uh, I find that apart from the skills, which are more like the scaffolding that people may have,
Mm-hmm.
this intention to serve society.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was reading this APA book.
Mm-hmm.
They describe Lewin as the complete social scientist,
Mm-hmm.
methodologist, a researcher, and action oriented practitioner.
Yep, and a lot of his research was just to reflect or to study the outcomes from his action practice.
Yeah.
So it was connected.
Yeah.
Hence the words action research. It was.
Yeah. So just reflecting back on my journey, there was something I wanted to mention. I hope I can just mention it now.
Sure.
So my original quest for truth and justice,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought I could serve via journalism,
Mm-hmm.
was even
It's
more
a noble quest.
Yes, it was even more refined through this journey of applied behavioral sciences. The form of writing shifted,
Mm-hmm.
but the motive for establishing truth in a more methodical manner,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what continues to sustain my energy in this field.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'd just drop that.
I just immediately pictured you perhaps, well, here's Dad at 96 still writing letters to the editor
Yeah.
of the local paper in Spokane, Washington,
Wow.
often about the current political climate.
Wow.
Yeah. And his defense of people who are easy to scapegoat, like the LGBTQ community in the U.S. And so maybe that's a future for you where you will use your social science knowledge to
Yeah.
produce material for newspapers.
Possible.
Just popped into my head.
Yeah.
Now, the political climate makes it, you know, makes that more dangerous, I guess you could say. Perhaps in India, it's a fairly conservative
Yeah, we must
environment.
acknowledge the shift in times too,
Yeah, it's
because
certainly here in the U.S.
readers don't go to newspapers as much as on virtual media today.
That is true too, right? It could be online though,
It could be
Joseph
online.
George.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm working on autocracy and democracy, which would be my ninth book.
Very contemporary theme.
Yes, and I'm approaching it not as anti the current administration, even though I'm deeply troubled by the current administration, but I see them as a symptom of trends in U.S. culture from the beginning, as we talked some yesterday about the Virginia colony,
Yes.
which was totally autocratic. There was no, they would have tried to get, they probably would have killed you or locked you up if you said you valued democracy. That would be a rebellious thing to think. So they were there for king and for the Church of England, and all being one with making money in the new world, and as they saw it as the new world. Anyway, what I'm writing is then about the what is autocracy, what's democracy, and what's the trend, the sort of the common threads throughout U.S. history of those two things. So it's not so much it is about moving away from autocracy, and right now we have a person that wants to be autocratic, at least in the presidency, but it's not so much about that person. It's about what are we really trying to accomplish as a nation and maybe as a globe, really. I mean, do we, as humans, are we going to try to create societies that really have respect for
Yeah.
everyone?
And I wonder if the ongoing times, thanks to the acceleration and immediacy of information all across, will actually speak to uh, some of what you describe as the debunking of the Eastern and Western myths around these aspects as well,
Sure.
because the current opportunity also represents attention felt all across. I'm just back from
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's global.
just back from Vermont visiting Cecile, and she showed me live instances, or let's say, uh, very ongoing attempts to involve community, to be with the ecology, and there's this new social construction reality, if you will, from a different angle. So
In
people,
Vermont.
yes, so people like Otto Scharmer and
Uh-huh.
Joseph Jaworski are names that she put to me. And
Okay, cool. Well, I need to go to Vermont anyway. I've been to 48 states, and that's one I haven't been to. So
yeah,
I should go visit Cecile.
yes, she's a prolific writer too.
Yes, yeah. Okay. Well, that whole East West thing, just to say a little about it, I mean, it was originally thought about as the Greeks and the Persians. And so the belief there was that the West was more democratic, at least as represented by Athens, where I forget who wrote about this way back in 400 BC, but and the Persians were autocratic. and the myth today has reversed that into thinking that hierarchies, the West, and other forms of social values, like let's say Japan, for instance, being more like relational, uh, and less about hierarchy. Although they certainly have a strong respect for hierarchy in Japan. So
Yes.
I just think that there's a simplification that doesn't actually match reality, and perhaps in the DEI community, and Alon at times will say, well, OD is too Western.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said to him, well, Alon, so let's see, Lewin's a Jewish man who, was in Germany, and believes in group dynamics and uh, the social construction of reality and so on. Is that what you mean by Western? Well, how about Israel itself? Is that Western?
Mm-hmm.
Is that Eastern?
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
Mm-hmm.
Who are we talking about, really? And I share his critique of some OD that comes from the United States. Of like, I'm a skeptic of appreciative inquiry, which is a very popular OD approach, and I at times help people think about. Well, certainly, I want people to acknowledge what they appreciate,
Yeah.
but I don't want to keep them from talking about what they don't appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I think that's a harder thing to talk about in a constructive way.
If I may add,
So, anyway, go ahead.
in 2006, when I attended the ODN conference in San Francisco, I was very fortunate to see Chris Argyris
Okay.
take on the same argument that he just made of appreciative inquiry
Mm-hmm.
in a room of about 60 people who may have been scholar practitioners in appreciative inquiry.
Sure.
And then he goes to
Tough
this
audience.
Yes. And he goes to this flip chart
Uh-huh.
and he creates his famous left-hand side, right-hand side,
Mm-hmm.
and demonstrates to them that you know that appreciative inquiry works. However, you don't know how to explain how it works, which is to him a shortcoming in the science, the theory building
Mm-hmm.
of appreciative inquiry.
Sure.
And he could be as hard nosed as that, but he would live with that calling within him that we need to establish science and not just another form of practice. So, could the practitioners in appreciative inquiry look at what explains the theory? And I continue to reminisce that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, I'm just like, we do structured brainstorming where we have people only listen to what each person is saying is a barrier or saying is a possible solution. In that brainstorming, we do not allow people to critique each other's ideas. So you could say it's an appreciative process. You have to hear each other without critiquing. Later, you explore the meaning of the ideas. Again, we prevent them from debating, but rather making sure they understand. And then they do a multi voting and so on. But just the idea that they're only going to, I've been in a process, it was with John in Poland. He had a design from an appreciative inquiry person. That doesn't mean that they do it the same way as others, where we were only allowed to say appreciative things for what seemed like a long time to me, at least. Okay. I was sitting there with Alon, and we both have a critical mind. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so to me, that if that's all it is, if it stays stuck there, it's not enough because it's just not the reality in organizations. People are frustrated about things, and
There may be much left unsaid.
a lot would be left unsaid if it was only the one or the other. And people usually don't hear what their enough appreciation, certainly.
Yeah, and therefore dealing with the shadow could be a consequence later.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Cooper Ryder, in his first book, which I have upstairs, starts by saying the early foundations of OD were like flawed, and this is going to fix it.
Oh.
And now that's my interpretation of what he wrote, but I immediately am skeptical as soon as anyone thinks they need to establish their theory by saying
Eliminating.
past theories, like Lewin's social science or whatever, is flawed, and then don't have a detailed explanation of what they mean by that. Just immediately I'm guarded somewhat about. So I may just be too guarded, but well, this is fun. So
Indeed.
Wherever you would like to go with this remaining time.
Yeah. There was something that we spoke to yesterday. I'm just trying to reconnect that right now. In all that you've experienced, and there was much about experience in your knowledge formation in the early years, watching your father's work,
yes,
watching John, watching all of these people,
mm-hmm.
and that got you to a point of conviction that you got to study Lewin even more deeply, right?
Well, it was the critiques of Lewin that got me. That really got me there.
That was the trigger.
Yeah.
In a sense, therefore.
But I knew then, in retrospect, at that moment where I thought that I should actually read Lewin, that I had been practicing Lewin all my life without having really read him.
Yeah. So my query was about how much do you see the method of science that Lewin embraced has been jettisoned, so to speak, and what is its relevance in our complex world today? What's your opinion about it?
Well, that's another hour or something, maybe. No, I mean,
short version.
in OD, I would say that the dominant form of OD is more like a expert model, where the OD practitioner studies the organization and then gives recommendations to management. Sure. And that's completely anti-Lewinian.
Yeah.
So Lewin, in the work he guided within Harwood Manufacturing, and I think he worked a little bit elsewhere in organizations, but that was it. It was mostly in Harwood, Morrow's organization. The workers came up with their own solutions, did their own analysis of what's in the way of getting the work done, came up with their own solutions, came up with their own metrics, and implemented. And that's Lewin to a T. And that's how he helped social change, all the food studies he did with Margaret Mead, the farmers in the Midwest. Every time the people who actually did the work, the hands-on work, were helped to have dialogue within themselves and with experts pitching in and come up with their own approach, they implemented change. There was no barrier then. The barrier was gone of having the change imposed by an expert or by management.
Yeah, that's significant. So for Lewin, perhaps practical science meant that the participants in the change do the investigations themselves.
Yep. And then the research becomes really assessing whether they got the results they wanted. Mm-hmm. It's not a long research project before they do anything. Mm-hmm. He explains action research with bombings of Germany during World War II. the planes go. They hit they hit the target they think they're supposed to hit. They assess the damage. They assess whether or not that had the right impact on the Nazi war production. They come up with the next plan. So it's action. It's there's planning, action, assessment of the plan, the results. Same thing that he applied to industrial processes also, that you plan, do, check, all that kind of process stuff was partially Lewinian, partially others. But
I'm really curious. How do we get to Lewin's, let's say, third party agency, if I might put it that way? How do you see that role changing in today's time and age?
Do you mean like how does a third party enter a system successfully, or
Yes, and even engage with the system.
Okay. Well, I know for me, it's you have to be invited in some way, and
That's important. Yes.
yeah, and every now and then it's been someone who just like read about me or something, but mostly it's I'm invited by people who were through a lot of our T group learning. They were at places where change happened when they were younger.
Yeah.
And now they're older and they're leading an organization.
So that's long gestation.
Yeah, but you have to have the invitation. And then you have to, I think, with like the leader, have a contract that about feedback. Like I want them to tell me if they're troubled by anything I do or say. And I want them to, I hope they're willing to listen if I'm troubled by anything they do or say. And so I want to have that contract that all the people I work for have said yes to that. But I want to have any boss that I ever have. And then the contract, and then with the people at each layer, whoever brings you has to be willing to talk to the next layer and the next layer and say, here's what we're doing and here's why, and here's who this person is. And they have to be willing to put their skin in the game of whatever change they're trying to lead.
So that's as your experience guides you, but I'm really taken by that word invitation. The invitation presupposes that the top management commitment comes with it.
Sure.
To the process of involving people.
Yeah. They know they need something at least. And maybe they know that because of past experience, they have high faith that I know what I'm doing and or my associates know what they're doing.
Is that a point of vulnerability from the client? That they're willing to be exposed?
Sure, and I think there's plenty of people out there right now, if you're listening, that need help that aren't willing to admit it. There's more organizations that are underperforming than not and stuck in old ways of thinking, like management has to do all the thinking. We support the structure of having a management, but even the middle managers often even the top manager often feels powerless. Like they want the organization to be different, perform better, but everything they're trying isn't producing the result. So there's a lot of people that feel helpless in organizations.
And how often are these stuck points to do with thinking? And what's the share of relating to the other human? If you see the thinking component and the relating component,
it's got to be a combination.
It's got to be a combination. Okay.
And some are better at being clear about goals and so on.
Okay.
But not so good at articulating and connecting and monitoring. A lot of people hate to monitor. And so they don't at all. Or they over monitor. There's all kinds of ways that adjustments that each person has to make. And the best source of feedback is their direct reports, if they have people reporting to them. And they have to talk to each other.
Conversation.
About how it's working, what's not working. And
I was taken by the two words you used before, debate and dialogue.
uh-huh.
Right? These are two forms of conversation for me.
Yes.
Right? And
Quite distinct.
Quite distinct. Cecile and I were talking about the dialogic piece, the conversation that enables people to open up to each other. And that influence came from a scientist, David Bohm, BOHM.
Although Lewin was
Yeah,
on that without calling it dialogue.
That's what I was.
Even with his students in Berlin. He was absolutely helping and encouraging them to explore whether his theories made sense. So in a university where you were not allowed to even speak to the professors, in the classes Lewin was in, he had to just sit there and listen to lectures without any interaction.
Right.
And yet he would lead classes that were dialogue-based classes.
So in a sense, he embodied the model of the psychologist, the practitioner, and the researcher all in one.
Yes.
Wow. And it needed keen observation to really know, that he was combining all of this.
Yes. Yeah, and that was all independent of Bohm.
That's important.
Even his ideas about group dynamics, which was really about having dialogue. Because really Bohm probably was maybe writing about that in the 50s or 60s, and influencing the fifth discipline. Yeah, because he quotes Bohm in the fifth discipline. Yeah. So, but the other thing about entering or being external or being a third party, however you put it, is to know how to relate to the workers, lower in the organization, and I just assume that they're going to be afraid at first when I walk in. And
is that more to do with job security than anything else?
It has to do with self-esteem. It has to do with being not listened to, really. It has to do with, in some places, with consultants starting things and it not working very well, and then another consultant starting things and it not working very well, and then another consultant, and almost always imposing, even if it's good ideas like lean manufacturing, forcing it on the place in such a way that it's a fight and it never really gets implemented well. And but it can be worse than that, like places that have had the entire workforce, they have to reapply for their jobs, and a bunch of them don't get accepted again, and the ones that survive feel humiliated by the whole process and resentful and scared, and so now the whole culture is one of, and now there's less people, and it wasn't like it was really thoughtfully done, and so they're recovering from trauma. A lot of places are recovering from trauma. So anyway, I just have to start right away with them, with the Lewin and the farmers. Look, I'm not here to fix things for you. Your bosses, including the one that really brought me in, want the organization to figure out how to let you do the thinking, not have it forced on you by consultants, forced on you by top management. So that's what this is. If you're willing to try it. And I've never been thrown out yet. Once I get that far into connecting with them about.
You were mentioning, a time when the T group was uncovered as a possibility.
Yes.
And that's recorded in this book by Libet.
Yes.
Can you speak a little to that?
Sure.
I sense from what you just shared that in the work you do, the intimacy between co-workers is a real transformation that occurs, and that to me was perhaps what the original four experienced when they assembled these communities, after the war. Yeah.
Yeah, well, also the intimacy between layers
Hmm.
and functions and departments
Okay.
also.
Hmm.
So, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, so people identify with their own group and then they blame the other groups.
Hmm.
And that includes management blaming labor and labor blaming management. And so all that has to be uh, changed, basically, broken.
Okay.
Those patterns have to shift, or else they're
Mm.
not going to be as productive as they could be. And
Yeah.
but yeah, so this book here, Training in Community Relations, kind of a boring name
Yeah.
for one of the great books of all time. So Ron Lippitt in 1949 sat down and documented what happened in the 1946 workshop in Connecticut, which really was put together because of inequities in pay. So, for instance, the African American garbage collectors were paid pennies,
I see.
but it showed up in tension in the communities and uh, between various ethnic groups.
Okay.
And so the state of Connecticut actually hired Lewin and his associates to. An African American guy was in charge of their commission. Uh, so he hired, which was pretty uh, progressive for 1946
Yes.
in the United States.
Yeah.
But so they had a workshop
Hmm.
that was going to take weeks. I think 3 weeks, but I could
Wow.
be wrong. It might have been 5 even.
Okay.
And in the workshop, there were members from social agencies around
Hmm.
the state and other concerned members who wanted to help change the racial tension, race relations, the economic inequalities. And so they were there in workshops during the day, split into 3 groups, with Bradford, Lippitt, and Benet each running a group. They each had an observer taking behavioral notes, and that was important because and the observer was tracking, like, how much did the leader talk.
Okay.
If they thought there was conflict, they tried to track what happened. And what were important statements made throughout the day, and so on,
Mm.
by participants, by the leader. So they were tracking as much as they could, and there was a lot of, like, role play. Like, they would have a person pretend to be a black student in a school that was mostly white, and then another person would be the social worker, another person would be the teacher, and it would, anyway, they just did these different role plays,
Mhm.
and then they looked at it a lot from a Gestalt perspective. So Lewin was a Gestalt psychologist at the University of Berlin. He studied Gestalt,
Okay.
and so that's looking at it from like a holistic systems perspective, really.
Hmm.
So, what's it like now, do you imagine, to be the social worker? Okay, now what's it like to be the teacher? So, like, each person putting themselves into the other person's shoes, the whole group doing that.
Mm.
Yes, that's the Virginia. You're showing me a picture from Plan Change of the workshop, and there's Lewin in the center. Well, so in 1946, there then at Teachers College, I've been to that very spot. Uh, they uh, had the workshop during the day. Most of the participants went off campus, but there were a number of them staying on campus in, like, the dorms. And in the evening, then the faculty was going to meet every evening and process the observation notes,
Right.
or and recordings. They had recorded a whole bunch with tape recording.
They had tape that back then.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
audio recording.
Yeah, those big
Yeah, yeah,
spools.
reel
Yeah.
to reel.
Yeah.
Okay, so they were going over that and talking about it, and then it could have been this woman right here. But a black woman and two other participants knocked and said, "Well, can we come in? We're just stuck here on campus. We, would love to listen in if we could." And some of the faculty said, "No, no, this is faculty." But Lewin said, "Of course, come in." He was pretty open minded, and so he was in charge. And they were. And then one of the observers was saying, "Well, this is what happened. So and so said this and that." And one of the participants, again, I believe it was the young African American woman that was, we don't know her name,
Okay.
spoke up and said, "That's me. That's not how I experienced that moment. May I say, what I feel and what I thought?" And Lewin went, please do. And aha, the experience from the eye of the person that was experiencing it. This is something new. And so let's hear that. And then somehow later, Lewin said, "Well, what's it like? What's your experience of me as the leader of the workshops?"
That's interesting.
Yes. And of the other leaders. And so this became a rich conversation that evening about the experience of the participants and with the authority figures and with each other and of the workshop. And so Lewin, the next day, invited everyone that wanted to come and sit in on the debrief. Wow. Yeah. And as as he continued to process it, and with his colleagues like Lippitt and Benet and Bradford, they started to realize that the debriefs were more powerful than the workshop.
Wow.
And the idea of people talking about their own experience instead of sort of a more academic approach. Well, we trained in this and we trained in that. But now they were talking about, and the participants in this book of Lippitt's say, when they let us give them feedback, that changed everything. We started to give each other feedback. And so that was what Lewin and his colleagues then said, we need to have a workshop that's just this. It's just about your experience in the moment of each other and of the authority figures in the room. And also they learned from this Connecticut workshop that when people came alone and went back, they had less impact. But when they came in groups from their agencies, they got more done. They implemented more things successfully in their communities. And so the original T group then in 1947, the National Training Lab's original event was for groups. They invited groups from organizations, and it was, unfortunately, Lewin passed away before they actually had the workshop. Wow. He helped design it. Yeah. And then he passed away, and but that's how, it was originally called basic skills training, and then they changed it to T for training, and that began the T group method, which early in the history of OD, almost all OD practitioners went through NTL-T groups before they became practitioners, so that they could learn to pay attention to their own reactions, to own their own reactions, but also to use that as data with the client. Like if they felt concerned, it might be wise to tell the client that they felt concerned. Whatever it is that's really happening in the moment. And so that's the method. Dad took that and used it his whole career.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I'm glad people will be able to revert to this conversation for that. I like to come in on a, you can say, country comparative understanding of this.
Who's interviewing who here, George?
That's interesting. But let me share something
Yeah, I love
that
this. It's
makes it
great.
possible.
It's
See,
great.
in India, there was, I mean, it's still there.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Gauranga Chattopadhyay used to conduct the labs for the Indian Institutes of Management, and uh, the group relations conferences benefited a lot from him in India.
Uh-huh.
And in the 1970s, he wrote out a publication on dependence, right? In India, there's a lot of dependence based on who's in the pecking order,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
right?
Sure.
And in interactions with
Like you
one,
defer to the people in the
yes,
pecking
exactly,
order and
yes. And in one of the profiles in my book on Arun Joshi, he's a founder member of the Indian Society for Applied Behavioral Sciences.
uh-huh.
He said that became an issue when you do tea groups inside a company. Because once they go back to their former roles,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they learned of themselves at the workshop
Mm-hmm.
became extremely uh, tension filled relationships back in the organization.
You could.
It could.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if in a place like the US,
Mm-hmm.
there's more natural inclination to accept responsibility for oneself because one learns autonomy early in life.
Certainly, the authority relationships here have. It's acceptable to speak up to authority, although most people are afraid to do it.
Mhm.
And there's also a rebellion against authority that's deeply ingrained.
Mhm.
We're sort of, crazy really about authority.
Mm.
Like we respect it, we're afraid of it, we're against it,
Mhm.
so it's not a simple thing, but it's probably there's less of a one way of relating
Mhm.
like you would have like in Japan, for
Yes,
instance, where you would
yes.
not want to embarrass the authority figure by
Yeah,
questioning them
yeah,
or something.
yeah.
So yeah, I think T group learning would be. Uh, I mean, see what we have here though that certainly Dad was clear about is well, we'll have authority figures in the T group,
Mhm.
and they're of course trying to figure out how to do their role of being the authority figure and their whatever their role is, but also how to relate to people as humans.
Yeah.
And so they're working on that, and so that's then going to make it easy to transfer it. It's not just the subordinates going to a T group and then coming back and relating different to the leader when the leader hasn't been through a T group.
Mhm.
That's a setup for failure, probably. Even here,
Oh, even here.
even here, yeah.
Okay.
So we always are starting at the top and working down,
Mhm.
and then well, when we did that in Egypt with a gentleman from India
Oh,
as the top person.
I see.
That's what he wanted, but he understood that.
Okay.
Uh, and Chris has done work throughout Asia, but it was more project planning. It wasn't T groups. It was,
Okay.
but still, it was how to raise issues
Mm.
in a way that the people were willing to, and they appreciated it, willing to raise issues
Yeah.
in a way that's in service of the organization and the leaders.
Mhm.
Uh, but subordinates just left to the druthers uh, might have not raised the issues, for fear of,
Yeah.
again, uh, embarrassing the leader is
Mm.
in some cultures an embarrassment to me. If I've embarrassed the leader, I've
Yeah. Yeah. This is particularly sensitive in
yeah,
India,
yes, yes,
irrespective of the much uh, people attribute India with. That is,
uh-huh,
the infotech abundance.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
So the paradox is in an abundance of information, we still are trumped by the social hierarchy.
Sure, and you have to figure out how to work with that.
Yeah, that's a skill that's still in the making.
So see, I would love to do a T group on India.
Uh huh.
So this maybe the journey is not just to speak at Tata, but
Yes, yes, yes.
to do T group work there. But the 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 purpose is to know yourself and to have more awareness of your impact on others.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to choose. There's not a prescription that says now you have to tell your boss what you think of them or something
Right,
like that. That
right.
would be foolishness.
That would be prescription to the, yes,
Yeah.
the most foolish end. Yeah,
Now, if your boss is really wanting to know
yeah,
more, then
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
But the task is to how do I be myself and fit in. That's differentiation. How do I be myself really and fit in to the groups, to the culture, to the. It's not that I'm somehow now going to force my different way of
Mm.
approaching it on others.
So it's the simultaneous principles from Gestalt of differentiation and integration.
Yes,
And that's something that goes with the, uh, let's say, the process. The T group
the way
sensitization is
we
about
teach
that.
it,
Yes, yes.
certainly the way we teach it.
Right.
Yeah. So I would have high faith that it would make sense to people in India because part of the task is for them to think for themselves. And certainly don't do anything that we're saying that you think is a foolish thing to do.
Mm.
Now, we may be misunderstanding each other. That's worth exploring.
Yeah.
You might think we mean that you should always go do something, and that
Mm.
might not be uh, what I meant at all.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, but yeah, it's yeah. If the T group was just subordinates, and if they thought they were being taught that they should speak up,
Mm-hmm.
then that would not work well anywhere, really.
So people often speak of the thinking and doing gap, but I get a sense that there's also thinking and reflecting gap. It's in the
Sure.
reflection that the responsibility taking is more authentic in my guesstimate, if I might use the word.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah,
spontaneity
yeah.
that can be. It is fine. I'm pretty spontaneous,
Mm-hmm.
but and sometimes I wish I hadn't said something or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to just inhibit myself all the time
Yeah.
in fear of those moments. Uh, but the reflecting is the key to experiential learning, and this is T groups are an experiential learning model,
Mm.
and the what I think my father designed with colleagues like John over the years that was even better than the original design is that there'll be not everyone's just in the T group.
Mm-hmm.
Some are observing,
Mm.
and the T group stops now and then, so that you can reflect with your partner observer
Mm.
and think about your experience with some guidelines.
Those guidelines are given as, let's say, are these trained observers? Is the short question.
There are other participants that are.
Oh, okay.
They're all learning to be an observer.
They're from the same social unit, you mean?
Yeah. Well,
Ah.
I mean, they may be from the same organization,
Mm-hmm.
but they're just people.
I
Let me
get
put
you.
it that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
Whether they're the boss or
They're
the
not uniquely privileged by a method of exploring.
right, and
Okay.
so we're teaching them all the same skills,
Okay.
and they take turns
They take
observing
turns.
each
That's
other.
important.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the experiential learning must have structured reflection. Lewin pointed out that Newton, uh, it was that moment in time, millions and billions of apples had fallen from trees, and humans had witnessed that since
Yeah.
the dawn of time, but without coming up with a theory of gravity.
Mm.
It was the accumulation of knowledge. It was Newton's unique perspective. It was, but he was able to reflect in that moment on, oh, there's something more here than meets the eye. The apple always moves in this direction, and come up with a theory of gravity from that. But all those other humans had the same experience. There goes an apple. but without having the capacity to reflect on it in such a way that they made sense out of it. And experiential education has to have, for it to work, has to have that intentional reflection built in.
I'm reminded of John Scherer often quoting the poet T.S. Eliot. Everybody gets the experience, only some get the lesson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and part of the intention of the T group work we do is that people will be better throughout the rest of their lives at reflecting on the experience, the random experiences they have, and having some way of thinking about what was I feeling, what was I thinking, what was I wanting, did I do with my action, did that match what I want, or was it counter to it? How can I learn from my experiences and continue to develop myself? I think, for the sake of our poor listeners, that we should probably wind this down soon.
Sure.
And we'll continue without the listeners to have this lovely conversation all day.
Sure, you're the host and it's your show.
Is there anything else that you want to explore before we go offline?
For this podcast, largely, I'm happy where you may be
Okay, cool.
the flow, respecting your spontaneity and authenticity. I hope it is what your original intent was.
Yeah, this has been great. What it really has turned into, I think, is just an exploration with each other, which
I get that feeling too.
Yeah, and I hope and I trust that it'll be valuable to others.
Yes.
I was just looking real quick in these books for. I thought I had a picture in here of me on the campus there at Teachers College. In this, I tried to replicate Lewin's pose, but it's not actually that important. It's just sort of a silly thing. But I think playfulness is important. And the dawn of everything. Listeners, if this book is looking at recent archaeology and anthropology, and at least one conclusion is that human groups like to be different from the nearest group around them, and that we tend to get our identity by getting attached and then maybe getting defensive and closed-minded because we want to be different. And just reminded me earlier, you spoke of the Jesuits, and this has a lot in it about the Jesuit explorers that came to North America and into Canada, that area, trying to convince learning the languages, local languages, and then the Native Americans were learning French. They were mostly French. Jesuits, and then trying to convince the Native Americans that the European way of life was the correct way of life. And they would have these debates, and they were not very persuasive. They didn't have much effect on the Native Americans, who actually would look at the Jesuits and say, "But you bow to one man. And look at the squalor you live in, and and we we're equals. We have a chief, but the chief only they have to talk us into doing anything. They can't punish us. So we don't listen to them much. And so we're free. We have liberty. And why would we want to live like you live? And so anyway, these guys are saying, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, the influences on the founders of the United States, the ideas of liberty and so on, really came from the Native Americans that were encountered by the Jesuits. And they actually took at least one guy back to France, and he spoke all over Paris, and people were listening, and he was speaking of, I'm not sure if it's Seneca, I don't think, but the individual that came all the way over there spoke of liberty and equality, and these were not ideas that were really, they were new to France.
Wow.
the French, were living under the king, and I mean, these were not.
Is that a direct reference from this book?
Yes, yes.
Wow,
So
wow.
these were not European ideas, according to these
Oh, I
authors.
see.
Really, the whole enlightenment. What? No, it's not the Enlightenment.
The Renaissance? No?
Not the Renaissance. Maybe it is the Enlightenment, but
Yeah, I think it's the Enlightenment
uh,
with Rousseau and
yes, yes, yeah. Okay,
Voltaire.
so
Yeah.
it's the Enlightenment, yeah,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that had a big influence again here on Jefferson and
Washington.
yeah, in terms of at least landowning
Mhm.
males.
Mhm.
That they didn't really think liberty applied to everybody, but
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, so I just wanted to throw that in since you had mentioned the Jesuits earlier, and we had talked about that yesterday. I think that's a wrap.
Fine. I'm really happy. There's a larger arc of time, not just which is past,
Uh-huh.
but potentially what's coming up in the future.
Yes.
And being open to it is going to be my lookout.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm loving this. I really appreciate you coming to Delaware. And
I love it. Thank you.
yeah, it's nice to have a kindred spirit to speak to.
Indeed. Indeed.
Okay, dear listeners, thank you again for tuning in, and I will look forward to the next time we speak. And thank you so much, Joseph George, for.
My pleasure.
Oh,
Lovely home also that you have. Thank you so much.
oh, that's sweet of you, man. I do love being here. Okay, take care. Hey, I appreciate you listening. This again is Gil Crosby, and I want you to take advantage of what's available to you. I have many free materials. I am happy to talk to people about their situations, especially if you're trying to create change, either social change or organization change. We have frequent workshops that are available, T group workshops. If you have never been in a T group with us, then don't miss it in your life. It's many people have said to me, of all the trainings I've ever received, I got this one 30 years ago, and it's the only one that stuck with me. You're learning from your actual interactions with the other participants and with the faculty. The faculty are walking the same talk that they're teaching of behavioral skills. It's a training workshop. That's what the T stands for. This is done in the spirit of the creation of T groups by Kurt Lewin and his associates. It's for groups. It's for teams. That's how it was originally designed. It is a opportunity to learn about theory and put it directly into practice. Again, the original design, you learn things and then you put them into practice. It was not just all ambiguity, which is how some T groups, most are led today, where the faculty hardly says anything. That's not how this is designed. So join us for that. There's always workshops. There's the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which has certificate programs, a two-year program where you will learn from T groups and learn how to do all the organization development work that my father designed, most of it, and I continue that practice alongside my brother Chris and many other associates. So don't be a stranger. There's a lot going on. It's always changing. So be in touch, and it's on the website, crosbyod.com. I look forward to working with you in your organization or as you pursue things like reducing gun violence and decreasing racism in our society. Whatever your goals are, the social science of Kurt Lewin guides how to achieve those goals in a reliable way. And so that's what I apply and practice every day. And I invite you to do the same. Together, we can create high productivity and morale in organizations. We can create stronger foundations for democracy. We can create a better world.